Hi, this is Colin Sandberg from Backbone Performance, and I thought I'd try to post some videos with my answers to common questions I get from athletes. While I always encourage athletes to reach out to me when they have questions, there are some questions that come up often enough that I thought it'd be worth it to make some videos, be used as resources to coach and non-coached athletes alike. Promise that I'll try to keep it brief, so let's get started. Next question. I'm not able to do my workout because it's too hard. What do I do? Again, here, there's some nuance to this, and the answer depends on whether you're just looking at the workout saying, I don't think I can do this, or you're actually out there and you can't hit the numbers. If it's the former and you're like, this is too hard or I'm too tired, my response is probably going to be try it. And a lot of times people surprise themselves. Sometimes you feel like you're really, really tired and there's no way you're going to be able to get through a workout. And then you get out there and you surprise yourself and you actually feel pretty good once you open up. If you can't hit the numbers, something is wrong. Either you're too tired or the targets are too high for one reason or another. So this is where we really get the benefit, I think, of cycling being a non-weight bearing sport. And you actually do have, I look at that as an opportunity to really push yourself to the limit. And usually, in most situations, the worst thing that can happen is you just can't do it. As opposed to if you're a weightlifter or even a runner for that matter, you got to be really, really careful with workouts like that because you could actually have an acute injury if you overdo it. Whereas in cycling, most injuries, unless we're talking about crashes, are chronic injuries, not acute. It's also one of the things that's, I think, great about having a power meter because you have these target ranges for a lot of workouts, and if you can't hit the numbers, you stop. Now, there's different philosophies out here about this, but my philosophy is that doing some workouts that are to the point of failure, that's a very important part of your training. Now, I'm not talking about every day or even every week that everything is to failure. You're definitely going to get in trouble really quick like that. I'm just saying that if you don't ever push yourself to the point of failure, then you don't know what your limits are, and that's a really important question. If you're looking at a race file, for example, and you see the key moment of the race where the breakaway went away and you didn't make it. Well, the big question that I'm going to have there is, were you not physically able to do that effort, or was there something else going on? So let's say you saw that you crunch the numbers, you do the math, and you had to do 400 watts for 3 minutes to make the break, and you didn't do that. So is that because you just physically weren't able to, or is it because you were in the wrong position, or is it because of what happened earlier in the race and you were worn down from previous efforts and you were tired? And depending on how you answer that question, it's going to depend on what you do about it, because if it's positioning that we need to work on, there's maybe you need more experience in races, maybe you need to work on how you read the race. If it's efficiency, maybe we do more tempo and sweet spot and endurance work. If it's just like you couldn't physically do that 400 watts for 3 minutes, even if you were totally fresh, then maybe we work on VO2 max, and you can get yourself to the point where that's going to be something that's possible. So, okay, let's say I get out there and I just can't hit the numbers in my workout. One of three things is probably going on. One, you're tired, you're fatigued, maybe you're sick or injured. Two, your zones are off. Or three, the workout's just too hard. So let's address all three of those real quick. If you're tired, sick, or injured, there's some good measures you can look at here. One is your training manager. Now, this is assuming you're using a power meter for all of your rides and you've got You've got everything up there on the chart. If there's stuff it's not including, that's going to be off. But if you're seeing a TSB below, I usually say, different coaches will say different things. I'll say minus 30. There's a good chance that you're going to have trouble doing a lot of the high intensity work because you'll just be too tired. Although it does depend on what the specific workout is. And if it's a really killer workout, you might have problems if your TSB is anywhere in the negative. At the same time, you got to take training manager and that stuff. We're talking about ATL, CTL, TSB here with a grain of salt because it's all dependent on having your threshold set right, your FTP. It's also using normalized power, which normalized power can overrepresent certain types of efforts and underrepresent others. Won't get into the specifics. But the big reason is that training manager only takes into consideration the stress caused by training, and specifically only your cycling workouts that you have a power meter for. So some people look at RTSS or running TSS, and you could go in and plug in a TSS for anything, although when you're talking about like a cross-training workout, if you were rock climbing or something, you're kind of picking a number out of thin air. I think the big problem, though, is that it does not take into consideration what I'd classify as non-productive stress. So if you are stressed out at work or with personal problems or emotionally, it's stress. And your body's going to be stressed out, but it's not a productive stress in the same way that training is. So it doesn't know about that. And I think the other problem is that there's this assumption that your body's ability to recover is constant. But that's not always true. So, for instance, sleep is not consistent, not extremely consistent for most people, and your TSB might be plus 10. You might be thinking, I'm feeling pretty good, but if you only slept 3 hours last night, you're probably going to have trouble with a lot of workouts, especially a high intensity one. Another measure a lot of athletes look at is resting heart rate, and this is really simple, but it can be pretty effective. You want to take it first thing in the morning when you wake up, and really what you are really looking for is what was your heart rate just before you woke up, which there are some tools you can do that now. Some people use sleep monitors. Some people use these watches that are activity monitors that you can keep on all the time, and it'll give you that data. There is also there are a lot of smartphone apps that use the light and the camera on your phone. You just put your finger over it, it'll tell you what your heart rate is. But there's still some, I'd say, fairly significant measurement error there. And even if you're just, your alarm goes off and you're startled, your heart rate might go up significantly. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But the theory is that if you have a pretty good handle on what your resting heart rate is, and then it's 10 beats higher one morning, something is probably off. Either you're getting sick or you're sort of in the hole in terms of your stress recovery balance. So you've established, let's say we're at the point, you've established you're tired. What do you do about it? That's the big question. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, I can't hit the numbers for my VO2 max intervals, but I want to do something. I want to get a benefit out of this workout, so maybe I'll do some LT intervals and tempo, or I'll do a long endurance ride. And there I would say, no, do not do this. If you're tired, you need to get more rest. So more training is not the answer here. So go home, have a recovery drink, get a good night's sleep, take a nap if you can, if that's a possibility for you. And if it's appropriate, maybe you go out the next day and try the workout again when you're hopefully better rested. Okay, so second possibility, your zones are off. Now, I know this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, because earlier I said, yeah, you have to have some workouts where you push yourself to the absolute limit. But in general, you should be able to hit your numbers, and the vast majority of workouts are not workouts to failure. There's a mindset that some people have that the harder I'm working, the better, and that's not usually the case. So if you're supposed to be doing LT intervals and you're like, I can go harder than this, but now you're actually doing VO2 max intervals, that's a different system you're training. It's not what the workout was intended to do. And it's not to say it's not any kind of benefit, but it's a different type of benefit than the workout was really intended to have. And just as a general rule, that really high intensity stuff, you get quick improvements in your fitness, but the limit is lower of how far you can improve. So you plateau pretty quickly, or you hit the ceiling pretty quickly, versus the lower and moderate intensity workouts might be longer to see noticeable improvements, but it'll be a steady and more sustainable improvement. And bottom line, lower your FTP setting if you need to. There's no shame in it, and it doesn't mean you're going to get any less workout or any less benefit from the training. In fact, you might even get more benefit in the long run. So the other tricky thing about this with the zones is that most coaches, including myself, are prescribing workouts and intervals and zones based on standard percentages of FTP. But FTP alone doesn't really tell the whole story. And there's an argument that a number of coaches have made fairly recently about this, that you need to look more completely at a power profile. So for example, you want to know what's your 5-second power, your 1-minute power, your 5-minute power, and your 20-minute power. And for example, the people at Sufferfest have pushed this, and it's pretty cool, and I think it's worth looking at. They've got a test they call a 4DP test, meaning a 4-dimensional power test, which is a protocol, and you have to test all 4 of these things, and you have to do it all in 1 hour. So you're also testing how well you're able to recover from these efforts, not just what you'd be able to do when you're completely fresh. And then they take those numbers and they actually use them to give individualized targets for specific intervals based on that power profile. And I think it's a super cool concept, but in the real world, the problem is that those results can change pretty rapidly. So, for example, if you've got an athlete who performs not very well on like their VO2, the 5-minute test, and let's say that their 5-minute power is only 5% higher than their 20-minute power. So you say, okay, focus on VO2 max stuff like 5-minute intervals for the next month, and they do improve, and then the next month they're up to a point where their VO2 max is 10% over their threshold. So significant improvement there. But how do you know that unless you're testing? And are you going to test every month? For me, I'm really reluctant to have people do that, because I think that those tests can be really stressful, and there's always error involved. It might not be the same condition, exactly the same conditions you're testing under, even if you're testing indoors. And the athlete might be tired, blah, blah, blah. So for me, for the time being, I'm interested in this stuff, but I'm going to stick with mostly FTP, and then you got to pay attention to the individual athletes and what they do well with and what they really struggle with. So finally, third possibility: what if the workout was just too hard? And first, like I said at the beginning, it's my belief that you do have to do some workouts that really push you to the point of failure. But also, I'm human. I design these workouts, and I don't have a magic formula to know exactly what people can do and what's optimal, and what they're not going to be able to do. So I think it's important to give athletes a variety of different workouts. I'm always looking at new ideas and trying to be creative with that. And sometimes I get it right, and sometimes I don't. And that's where the communication with your coach is really important, letting them know how the workouts went. And At the end of the day, also, like I said at the beginning, with cycling being a non-weight bearing sport, I think that's a really cool opportunity because you can try out these new workouts, and sometimes they're going to be really hard, sometimes it's going to be too hard. But for the most part, the worst thing that can happen is you can't do it, and you're not generally risking acute injury like you would be in a weight bearing sport. So hopefully that helps answer that question. If you have any other questions you'd like me to answer, please write them in the comments or email me at colin@backboneperformance.com. Happy riding.